Thanks for joining us today. This is our third session in the Indigenous Parenting series. And so before we get started, our Xpey Wellness team would like to begin by acknowledging and honoring the diverse Coast Salish nations that we work with and whose territory we reside in. And so our team is made up of a diverse group of people with roots and ancestries in different nations and cultures. And so we acknowledge that when we show up to this work and within these communities, we are doing so as guests. And so the Xpey Wellness team is made up of myself, my name is Harley, Bianca Elliott, and Marco Cafiero. And so today we are joined by Marguerit James and Ashley Simpson, and they were with us last week and they talked about breastfeeding education with us, and this week they're going to talk about milk supply. And so before I pass it over to them, I do just want to quickly mention that we have some door prizes. And so how we'll do the door prizes is if you have questions throughout, please feel free to unmute yourself. It's a very casual environment. So please, if something comes up, you can share it, you can type in the chat box, whatever works best for you. And so at the end, we'll have the facilitators choose their favorite question, and those people will win the door prizes. Yeah, and so I think without further ado, I'll pass it over to Marguerit for a prayer.
Okay. Good afternoon or mid-morning. My name is Marguerit James, and my Indian name is Huihuayaltanat. I come from Penelakut tribe, and I'm a great grandma, and I'm happy to be here. And I'm happy to speak on many lands, and in our native culture, we have to acknowledge the land that we're on and say thank you for letting us be on your land, no matter, and if we are a group of people from different nations, I thank you for letting me speak on your land, wherever these lands come up for all of us. I thank you for letting me be on your land, wherever it is, because that is the way of our people. And do you want me to do the prayer now? Okay. Creator, I thank you, Creator, for this beautiful day. No matter what storms we go through, we come out okay. We have all these different challenges in life that makes us really think hard on how we can fit in this world, in the world of turmoil and right now. But as Native people, we have to know that we're a strong Indigenous people and that we will cope with whatever you, Creator, put forward to us, and we will survive, and we will help each other, and we will support all the peoples of the different land, different nations that I'm with at this moment. I bless all of you. I bless all of the people that participate and are willing to learn, because we are putting forth a good program for everyone.
Thank you so much, Marguerite, and grateful for you to start us off in such a good way today. So hello, everyone. Very grateful to be sharing this time with you. This, I guess it's not morning anymore, this afternoon. My name is Ashley Simpson, and my mother is Wet'suwet'en from the Haggleget Nation, and my father is English and Scottish. And I'm a very grateful visitor on the traditional Snuneymuxw First Nation territory here on Vancouver Island, where I live with my family. And would like to also acknowledge all of the traditional territories that everyone is joining us from today. And want to say thank you to the Xpey Wellness team for inviting us to be with you again this week, and just for putting together these really beautiful webinar series that are keeping us all connected and in conversation with each other. So very grateful to be sharing a bit about breastfeeding with you all today. So I've put together a few slides just to kind of guide our conversation. So I will bring those up now. Are you able to see that? Is that working? All right. So last week, Marguerite and I talked a bit about things like attachment and the benefits of breastfeeding and just some general breastfeeding information and how to support, you know, establishing that new breastfeeding relationship. And so this week we thought we would talk a little bit more about some specifics. And so talking about some of the logistics of breastfeeding a newborn baby. Lots of questions come up about milk supply and also ways to know that breastfeeding is going well. So we were going to talk about some more specifics today. And again, I wanted to acknowledge that Marguerite and I are both joining you today from the Snuneymuxw First Nations territory here on Vancouver Island. And so I wanted to kind of start off just by saying too that this is really just one perspective on breastfeeding and you know, things like milk supply and how to ensure a good breastfeeding relationship, and just acknowledging that as new parents, you're probably receiving information from, you know, multiple different sources and sometimes maybe even conflicting information. And so I really just want to acknowledge that it's important to kind of take in that information and, you know, keep what works for you and your family and, you know, just kind of leave the rest. And so I hope that there's something today that you're able to take and will be helpful for you and your little one in your breastfeeding journey. So it's kind of starting right off the bat, talking about breast changes throughout pregnancy and the postpartum period. We know that breast changes happen through both prenatal and postpartum period, and you know, throughout our lives. And so you may have noticed that there were some breast changes in your early pregnancy. Usually breast changes are one of the earliest signs of pregnancy, and you may have experienced, you know, tenderness or some sensitivities. You may have noticed some changes in shape or size of your breasts. And usually there's some darkening that happens. So usually the veins in our breast look a little bit darker. The areola, which is this, I have my cloth breast here. The areola around the nipple typically gets darker, and the nipple itself. And so these are all due to hormonal shifts that happen throughout pregnancy and postpartum, and are actually thought to help in those early days to help baby to locate the breast and to latch on successfully in those first moments after birth, when baby's vision isn't so great. And so it's kind of like creating this little bullseye for baby to locate where they need to be to feed. And so your body starts producing colostrum. So our first milk that our baby is going to receive is called colostrum. And it's this thick yellow, really nutrient dense substance that starts getting produced around, you know, 16 to 22 weeks in our pregnancy. So in our second trimester, our body is already preparing that first milk that our baby is going to receive when they're born. And then as after baby is born, usually around day 2 to 5 is when our milk starts to transition to what we call mature milk. And so mature milk kind of looks a lot more, you know, it resembles a lot more what we would consider milk to be. So it's, you know, it's waterier, it's white, or it may have a bit of a yellow tinge still. Sometimes our milk actually has a blue tinge to it, but it's definitely different from that colostrum that's, you know, in really small amounts, and that thick kind of yellow substance that our baby gets right after birth. And so when our milk comes in around day 2 to 5, you may experience something called engorgement. And so engorgement may feel like, you know, heavy, full breasts. And it's because, you know, our milk is adapting to meet the needs of baby. As baby gets older, baby's tummy size is growing, their nutritional needs shift. And so our body is producing more milk to meet those needs. And so engorgement can be really uncomfortable, and it can also be really hard for a baby to latch on. If you imagine almost like a balloon, baby is trying to, latch onto that and get some breast tissue in their mouth, and it can be really difficult for them to latch on when our breasts are so full. So there's some ways that we can minimize that engorgement to ease your discomfort and also make it a little bit easier for baby to feed effectively. And so things like nursing often, so getting milk out of the breasts, trying not to skip any feeds. So some moms find that they're really engorged when they wake up in the morning if baby missed a feed through the night. So trying not to skip any feeds, focusing on latch and positioning, which we're going to talk a lot about. And then also letting baby finish the breast before offering the other side. And then some ways that one of the kind of tips and tricks that was always shared with me to ease some of that discomfort is either having a hot shower and doing some kind of breast massage to relieve some of that engorgement, or sticking some green cabbage leaves, green because they won't stain your shirt or your bra like a purple or red cabbage leaf will, but taking some cold cabbage leaves that you've had in the fridge and sticking those in your bra, and that creates a cold compress and relieves some of that discomfort during those early days when we're experiencing engorgement.
So I'd like to give a little bit of teaching on what you're saying, Ashley, that as you become pregnant and then there's changes that happen with your breast as it goes with nature, and how we as women have to take care of our breasts, and it starts to become tender, and there's certain precautions that we need to take care of ourselves and our breasts, because it gets as it's getting full, it gets really tender. So we have to be careful not to bump it, or like if you have older children, that they can't be jumping on you or in some way harming the process of your breast filling up. And we have to take care of all of that. And what I want to say too is that our breasts are filling up with natural stuff that like Creator gave to us women to know what it is that we have to do to help that milk be really good and pure for our babies. And also in our lifetime as Native people, our ancestors, our Salsila, as in my language, it's our grandmothers, that our grandmothers would tell us young women how to take care of ourselves, also what to eat, what to drink, and how to take care of ourselves in a way so that we're getting prepared for our baby. So as we live in many different parts of the world, we have different foods that fit for how we look after ourselves. And in my time, we went with the pure foods from the land, and there was no extra stuff that we have now that's being sold in the stores. We didn't have that. So our grandmothers told us what to eat, what to drink, and what not to help ourselves. So we had to follow these directions from our grandmothers to know that it was to help us so that we can be prepared to look after our babies in a good way. But nowadays they have all these blenders and foods, but we can still use the fruits and vegetables and still take care of ourselves. And it's done in a faster manner. But like for babies, we have to, they've changed the rules when I was a mother, and they let me give my babies juice at 3 months. Now that doesn't happen because the baby is still growing. And so I wanted to add that because in our time, my time, we had to follow the guidelines from our grandparents to know what was good for us and how to take care of it, and how do we take care of our breasts as they're getting bigger and tender, very tender. You have to be careful of that, not to bump it, and what I was told was to wash we had to wash our breasts and like really wash it really nice, take care of it, and then not rub it after you have washed it. You kind of tap it and not rub it. You just kind of use your towel gently because our breasts are getting ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Marguerite. And yeah, so many important reminders about taking care of ourselves and our bodies when we're breastfeeding and caring for our little ones. Thank you. So I wanted to share a bit of information about breastfeeding a newborn baby, because it's usually in those early days after baby is born when breastfeeding is established, when lots of kind of questions and concerns and things come up for families. So we talked about this a lot last week, but it's recommended that initially breastfeeding within the first hour after birth to help with establishing that breast milk supply, and also to that the breastfeeding relationship will be successful for both mom and babe. And there's also health benefits to mom and babe to be starting breastfeeding right away. It's also recommended that breastfeeding on demand happens, and so that looks like baby being able to feed or being offered the breast whenever they're showing signs of showing those hunger cues. And so this helps to support our milk supply because our milk supply relies on supply and demand, which I already mentioned, but which really just means that as many times as we feed, or the more that we stimulate our breasts, the more we feed our babies, the more milk our bodies are going to make. So when we're following our baby's hunger cues and allowing them to feed whenever they're showing those signs, then we're really stimulating that breast regularly and telling our body that it needs to be making the milk, which is exactly what we want. And in those early days and weeks, you might feel like you are breastfeeding, 24/7. You're constantly breastfeeding, and that's the normal kind of breastfeeding relationship with a newborn. Newborns typically feed 8 to 12 times in a 24-hour period, which works out to be about every 2 to 3 hours, so day and night. And it's also really normal in those first couple of weeks and months when a newborn is learning how to breastfeed, and they're still kind of learning how to effectively get that milk out of the breast, that a breastfeeding session can take up to over an hour sometimes. So if you think about that, if you're feeding every 2 hours and every feed is lasting for about an hour, that really is the majority of your life in those days and weeks and months that you're spending with baby at the breast, which can be exhausting and stressful, especially if you have other children in the home and things. So acknowledging that it is a lot of hard work. And then one of the most important ways that we can ensure that breastfeeding goes well for mom and babe is a good latch. And we're going to talk pretty extensively about that in a little bit. So milk supply is usually one of the top questions that families have. Am I making enough milk? How do I know that I'm making enough milk? Is baby getting enough? So I wanted to go through some of the details about milk supply so that there's kind of a general foundation when we start talking about some of the other elements. So in the first days after baby is born, our body is producing colostrum. And so our colostrum actually starts in pregnancy, like we already talked about. And so that colostrum is going to be produced regardless due to hormones. And so it's not based on the amount that baby is actually feeding. You don't know. You don't know. So colostrum is not dependent on supply and demand. But then once our milk comes in around days 2 to 5, that's when our breast milk really relies on the supply and demand model, which means we really want to be feeding baby as much as possible and making sure that the milk is being emptied from the breasts to be signaling to our bodies to be making that milk and to make sure that we're making enough for our baby. And so in those engorgement days, so usually the first few weeks, sometimes it lasts a couple months for some family or for some moms, your body is adjusting. And so your breasts might be leaking, you might be experiencing engorgement, and that's just your body kind of adapting to determine how much milk your baby or your babies need. And so usually after a couple of months, then our bodies kind of regulate and they know how much our body is needing to produce in a 24-hour period for our baby. And so you won't notice as much leaking and engorgement after that. And then it's also really important because sometimes moms or families get discouraged around things like breast size, or maybe you didn't experience a lot of breast changes in pregnancy. You don't feel full, or maybe you don't experience like a sensation during a letdown. Or maybe you're pumping, for an hour and you're only getting, this like an ounce or something. And those really aren't true indicators of how much milk our body is actually producing. And so really the best indicator that breastfeeding is going well and that our milk supply is, healthy and well is if baby is gaining weight. And so, you might have your care provider in those first few days and weeks after baby is born really focusing on doing, weight checks with baby. Your midwife might be coming to the house and weighing baby. And so that's to make sure that things are going well, and also for baby's health, but also that, breastfeeding is also going well and that there's no milk supply issues. There are, though, reasons why sometimes milk supply might be low or milk supply might be decreasing. And so if you are supplementing, so if for whatever reason you're supplementing with formula or bottle feeding, either breast milk or formula, if you're offering baby a pacifier, if baby is sleepy, so that maybe there aren't enough feeds happening or feeds are really short. Sometimes there's health issues with baby, so things like jaundice, or if baby has a tongue tie, all of these factors can influence your milk supply. And that's not to say that, that will be a forever thing, because it's absolutely possible to boost up your milk supply and increase your milk. It just takes a little bit of work, but there are some reasons why sometimes our milk supply dips down a bit. And so ways to support or increase our milk supply, if that's something that you're interested in. So again, the most important thing we can do for our milk supply and for just breastfeeding in general, and kind of ensuring that that breastfeeding journey kind of lasts as long as we want it to, is to ensure a good latch, because this promotes efficient nursing, meaning that baby is getting as much milk as possible during a feed, and it also helps with pain and discomfort. So if mom is uncomfortable during feeds, then obviously less likely to be wanting to feed for as long, and might impact some of her breastfeeding goals and things. So we really want to make sure that latch is the first thing that we're looking at to support breastfeeding. Feeding frequently. So again, the more you nurse, the more milk your body will make. Offering both breasts during a feed. So we want to offer the first breast and let baby drain it, even though our breasts are never actually technically empty, but your breast will feel empty. You will notice, a significant decrease in the milk in the breast on one side. And then even if baby kind of disengages, seems uninterested, or maybe they're sleeping, it's really important to offer the other side, and you might be really surprised to notice how often they actually will still take the other side and continue feeding. So we want to do that as much as possible to make sure that both breasts are being offered in a feed. And if baby really isn't interested and you are still noticing that your other breast is quite full, then you can consider pumping or hand expressing to just really increase that amount of breast stimulation that's happening. And just a word of caution, or to take note, that that can be a bit of a slippery slope when you start pumping on top of feeds or doing some hand expression, that can cause kind of oversupply issues. So some women experience oversupply. So just being cautious that you're not like overstimulating your body to be making, you know, double the amount of milk that you're actually needing, because then that causes discomfort and engorgement and things. So really, you know, finding what works best for you to kind of hit that kind of like happy spot, I guess, to make sure you're getting enough milk for your baby, but not too much. And then,
I would like to speak too about when the mothers and the baby are getting used of these feeding times, that like a new mother is stressed because she wants to do the best she can for her baby. And like you were saying, talking about how if your breast's not producing enough milk for your baby, that time between the mom and the baby, you're getting to know each other. And I know that I used to get stressed too if I didn't have enough milk. And what you need to do is be calm, and not, because when you're stressful, I don't know if that can affect how your milk's coming in, and how you need to use that time as a mom. You're a new mom, you and baby are getting used of each other. And that what I was taught when I was really young is that, you know, that's really natural for babies to when you do introduce each other with your breasts to your baby. What they taught me when I was young is that you use your breast, the point of your breast, and you put it on the cheek of the baby, and the baby will automatically look for your breast. That is one of the teachings I had, and I tried it, and my baby looked for it. And then you have to find a comfortable way of feeding your baby, because if it's going to be numerous times of feeding, and then you're starting to get tired, and the baby is trying to get that breast from milk from you. So you could lay down with your baby, lay down and pick yourself up, so both you and baby are comfortable, because the baby knows how to fix up and then get the breast milk from you. And they know how, the babies, and you and the baby have to learn how to help each other. And because I used to get stressed, and I thought, okay, I got to be calm. And that time that you've spent with your baby, and you're laying down and you're together, then it's going to come later that you two are going to get comfortable, and you're going to, you know, it's going to get easier. You've gotten to know each other. And I want you to know that, and that as a young mom, I had to learn that. And that's not Honitum or non-native teaching. It's our native teaching in how to take care of ourselves, how to be comfortable with our baby. Hachka.
thank you, Marguerite. And you touched on so many important points that we're going to be chatting about. You always know exactly how to lead us into the next conversation. So appreciate presenting with you. Thank you.
Interrupt you. There is a question, Marguerite, that I wanted to pass on. So this person said, I'd love to hear any traditional or ancestral foods or traditions around breastfeeding, particularly plant medicine that we can connect to on Coast Salish land, and particularly around increasing milk supply.
Okay, we used to have tea and water and juices from, like we had apples, oranges, all the fruit from the land, because like in those days we didn't have you know, like blenders and that, so we had to drink pure you know, like juices from our fruit from the land. And I told at the last gathering that one mother, she could not, her baby could not tolerate breastfeeding with the regular milk. So this grandmother used juice from the fish broths. That she said she wouldn't take my breast milk, so I had to find different broths from different foods from the land. And what she found was the broths from the fish, and that baby took to it, and she used that. So what we do as Native people, we have to find out the food from our lands, where we come from. There's different, like fruits and vegetables, also like the animals. Like if you make a broth, a soup in the broth, you use that, whatever your baby's going to accept from you. And our Native people have always looked for different ways to feed our babies, because if they're not going to accept our breast milk, we have to find those different things from the land. So I ask you as mothers to do that, to find out, and ask your grandparents. They're there, grandparents, aunties, they can help you and say, well, this is what we did. So I'm from Coast Salish, and some of you may be from the mainland and the prairies, but all of us have found different ways from our different foods from the land. That's where we had to find our own way of seeing what our babies accepted from us. I hope that answers some.
Thank you, Marguerite.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And just to kind of add to that, non-Indigenous, more Western approaches to foods and things that can increase milk supply. There's something called galactagogues, and that's either a food or a herb that really nurtures and supports milk production. And so there's different herbs, things like fenugreek and milk thistle, as well as medications, and then teas, like Marguerite was saying, lots of traditional teas that were used in different families and communities. And then one that's store-bought, that's really common that a lot of mums use, like mother's milk tea is something that's really readily accessible. Things like brewer's yeast, which can be added really easily to like cereals and granola or smoothies. And also things that you may already have in your cupboard or your pantry, like rolled oats or steel cut oats, are all foods and herbs that can help to support your milk supply. And then exactly what Marguerite was already saying, one of the most important things we can do to support our milk supply and just our overall wellness as new parents is really encouraging rest, staying hydrated, eating regularly, eating good, nutritious meals, and really just nurturing our bodies as they're doing that hard work of creating and producing that milk for baby. My dog is barking at the mailman. I'll just mute. So, like I already mentioned, one of the questions that usually comes up for families is how to know that breastfeeding is going well. And so there's so many different kind of ways to approach that. But just, knowing that when we're bottle feeding, whether it's breast milk or formula, we're able to see, on the side of a bottle, there's usually measurements. And so we're getting that kind of, validation and assurance through visuals that our baby is getting, however much milk during a feed. And so we don't have that with our breasts, but there are ways that we can kind of know and kind of calm our nerves around knowing that baby is getting enough milk. And so, like I already mentioned, one of the most important indicators is baby's weight. And so it's completely normal and healthy for babies in those first days after birth to lose up to 7% of their birth weight, actually. And so that's a normal process. And then after about 4 days and onward, baby typically starts gaining weight regularly. And so if there does happen to be any weight gain concerns, then really just having a conversation with your midwife or your doctor or your public health nurse, and figuring out a plan to make sure that you're supported in feeding and that baby's weight is getting back on track. And then probably the second most important way to be able to tell if feeding is going well is by how many diapers are being produced in a 24-hour period. And so as a new parent, you're going to become really in tune with your baby's bowel movements. And especially when you're breastfeeding, there's so many signs that things are going well that you can pick up on through checking out those diapers. And so when we talk about dirty diapers, so stools or bowel movements, it's typically one diaper per day of life. So for instance, on day 1 of baby's life, they're usually passing 1 bowel movement, so having 1 dirty diaper, day 2, 2 diapers, and so on, until they hit about day 4 or 5. And then it starts to kind of plateau around at least 3 large bowel movements. And a healthy kind of breastfed baby's stool looks soft and seedy and yellow, a lot like a seedy mustard type consistency. And so those are some really great signs that milk is being digested by baby. And then additionally, wet diapers. So you want to have at least 1 wet diaper per day of life until the same around 5 days. And so 1 wet diaper on day 1, 2 on day 2, and then at least 6 heavy wet diapers after about day 5. And so you want to make sure that baby's urine is pale yellow or clear. So those are some really great signs that things are going well. And then also some other kind of physical signs that you can watch for. Baby has a strong cry, they move actively, and they're easily woken up. And then on yourself, noticing that your breasts feel softer and less full after a breastfeeding session are all really good indicators of milk transfer happening. And so this is a really fabulous visual resource that's put out by the Best Start, which is a health organization in Ontario. And as you can see, there also shows the size of baby's tummy. So those first couple of days, baby's tummy is the size of a cherry. So pretty tiny, and that's reflective of the amount of colostrum that our body is making. So we make really tiny amounts of this really nutrient-dense food for our babies, and it's because their tummy size is so tiny. And then as the days and weeks go on, their tummy is expanding quite rapidly, and so that's also kind of synchronous with the amount of milk that our body is producing for them, and that their tummies are able to digest. So again, talking a little bit about responding to our baby's cues and knowing when they're ready to feed. There's kind of a spectrum of ways that our babies communicate this to us. So some early signs, they might be smacking or licking their lips, opening and closing their mouth, or kind of sucking on their tongue, their hands, anything they can get their hands on. And then they move into some more active signs. So now they're really trying to communicate that they're ready for a feed. So maybe, you know, grandma or uncle or somebody is holding them and they start rooting around and looking for a breast of whoever's carrying them, trying to get into a nursing position. So sometimes they'll start arching their back and trying to actually get into a feeding position to show you that they're ready. Fidgeting and squirming, they might be hitting you repeatedly or starting to fuss or have rapid breathing. And then some late signs, so kind of similar to maybe what adults would consider to be, you know, hangry, or they're at the point where they're kind of past their limit and they're quite upset. They might be crying or, you know, thrashing their head from side to side to really communicate to you that they are wanting their food and they're wanting it now. And so it's really important when they kind of reach this stage to try to calm them down before feeding. And just like Marguerite was saying, as you and your baby develop that relationship and you start to really understand your baby's cues and their feeding signs, then you start to be able to respond to them kind of in the early and active stages. And you'll find that it's less frequent that they're getting to the point of being quite upset to communicate to you that they're ready to feed.
Sometimes the babies, they know where your breasts are. I just want to put a little humor in it. The babies know when they want to eat and feed on you, and they know where mommy's breasts are. And my granddaughter was, her baby would, she knew where her breasts were, and she would start putting her head down and going to the breasts. So that was her one way of telling her, giving the cue that she was ready to feed. But they have their own cute little ways, the babies, of letting mom know, I want to eat now. And I really enjoy watching the young moms, how they've learned to take the cue and give their babies what they want. I just wanted to put a little, because my great-grandchild she'd be trying to go from one breast to the other and letting her mom know, I want to eat now. So yeah. I just want to throw that in there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. No, it is a lot of fun to watch babies communicate to their moms that they're ready to feed. And so one of the pieces that we've talked about as being really important in our milk supply and also just overall breastfeeding journey is ensuring that we have a good latch. And so what does that mean, and how do we get there? And so latch is literally just kind of the connection point between our breast and our baby's mouth. And so we want to make sure that that is optimal for many reasons. Mainly so that we're getting kind of efficient milk transfer, and also so that mom isn't experiencing any pain or discomfort. And so there's a few ways that we can really support getting a good latch. And important to start working on these pieces in those early days so that it's kind of just the routine, and both baby and mom know exactly what to do to get that good latch. And so we really want to encourage baby to always have kind of a wide mouth. And so think of baby as yawning. We really want them to open up their mouth as wide as possible to make sure that they're able to get as much breast tissue in their mouth as possible. And so we really want to make sure that the nipple is getting as far back in their mouth as possible, so that there's no kind of pinching or anything happening, but also so that baby's able to really massage that breast tissue to efficiently pull milk out of the breast. And so if you run your finger along the top roof of your mouth, your clean finger, you'll notice that in the front there you have like the hard palate. And then as you kind of get further back, there's a soft palate and you can kind of press on it. And so that's where we want the nipple to get to, so that it's not being pressed against that hard palate and causing any discomfort. And then the second piece of a good latch is really encouraging baby to being brought to the breast chin first. And so this kind of is often talked about if you've worked with a lactation consultant or public health nurse, or anybody who's maybe supported some breastfeeding. There's kind of this hamburger analogy that's often used. And so the way that that works, if you're not familiar with it, is that they encourage you to think of, how we bite into a big juicy hamburger, and that we don't kind of go at it, straight on, that we kind of tilt our chin up and kind of approach it and do this kind of nose, mouth, or chin, mouth, nose motion. And so same goes for when you're trying to kind of unhinge that jaw and create as much space as possible for baby to get like a good mouthful of breast tissue. Then sometimes that visual with the hamburger can be helpful, although some people are, our breasts are nothing like hamburgers, so take it or leave it if it works for you. But really just encouraging baby to open up as wide as possible and try and get that chin to be coming to the breast first. And so some signs of a good latch, of course, milk transfer. And so milk transfer is basically just being able to tell that milk is successfully, making its way to baby and being received on baby's end. And so some really great tips to make sure that milk transfer is happening is listening to your baby during a feed, or if you're supporting a mom in breastfeeding, trying to listen. And so the usual kind of typical pattern for a lot of babies, there's this kind of suck, suck, pause, suck, suck, pause, or maybe suck, suck, gulp. And so really listening, and so that you're able to tell, because that's usually kind of in line with when our letdown is happening. So they're getting this kind of big gulp of milk. And so they'll do like the suck, suck, and then do the swallowing. And so that's a really good sign that milk transfer is happening. There shouldn't be any pain. And so there's kind of this myth that breastfeeding is not the most comfortable experience, but that absolutely doesn't need to be the case. There might be some discomfort or some pain, some kind of, twingy feelings when you first latch baby on, especially as a newborn, when they're first learning how to latch on. But then within, a few seconds, definitely within like the first 30 seconds of a feed, that pain or discomfort should be subsiding. So if there's any pain that's happening, or even, discomfort, then that's usually a sign that there may be some ways that we could support adapting the latch to make it more of an enjoyable experience for mom. And then another piece to watch for is baby's lips. So again, having their chin on the breast, but also having their lips, it's what's called phalanged. And if you think of kind of like a fish mouth, having their lips wide open and kind of spread around the breast, and having either most or all of the areola covered by baby's lips is a really good sign that they got a lot of breast tissue in their mouth. And then there shouldn't be any kind of, other than listening to baby sucking or swallowing, there should be no slurping or kind of like lip smacking sounds happening. If that's the case, then that's usually a sign that there isn't a complete seal on the breast, which can cause nipple damage, like nipple cracking and things. And it's also not ideal for baby to get milk out of the breast. So if you take your clean finger gently and just stick it inside baby's mouth to kind of break that seal and get them off the breast, then it will allow you to kind of remove your breast out of their mouth. You don't want to just pull your breast out of their mouth, but you want to disconnect their mouth from your breast, break that seal, and then try relatching them, and just continually doing that, which can be frustrating and exhausting, but a really great way to practice and kind of get baby into the routine of doing a good latch each time. And then after a feed, sorry, Marguerite, were you going to say something?
I wanted to say that I didn't have that teaching as a young mom, because I'm like 76 years old, and we didn't have those kind of teachings of how to have a good latch, because like you were saying, I experienced cracked nipples because I didn't know that how to teach the baby to have a good latch, and I did get cracked nipples, and it's painful. And if you listen to Ashley and how she is teaching you how to do that, I wouldn't have had that problem, because I didn't know as an elder right now, I didn't know that we had to have a good latch because cracked nipples, and it's really painful, and then your baby wants to feed on you, but it's too painful, and I had to keep washing and putting warm cloth on my breasts to try and heal it and as fast as I could for my baby. So what Ashley is teaching you, it's really good teaching, because I never had that as a young mom, and that good latch is important. We don't want pain while we're feeding our baby. Thank you.
Thank you, Marguerite.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last piece that I'll just mention on that is after you're done a feed, you can check your nipples and see if they look pinched. Sometimes they'll look like a lipstick, the top of a lipstick. And so you want to make sure that that's not happening at the end of the feed, because that's a sign that the nipple is too shallow in the mouth and it's being pressed against that hard palate. And so we want to try and get the nipple back further in baby's mouth so that they're not pinching your breast at all. And that's exactly, like Marguerite was saying, how we get things like cracked nipples and a lot of nipple soreness. So some physical identifiers that we can check on our own bodies. And then so the other piece that comes kind of hand in hand with ensuring a good latch is around positioning. And so there's hundreds of potential options for positions to be in while you're breastfeeding your baby. And really, as you get to kind of learn your baby and find out what's comfortable for you, you'll find out what works. But before you even choose kind of which position you want to breastfeed in, just ensuring that you're in a comfortable position. So, you know, getting some back support or some pillows to support your arms or your wrists as you're feeding your baby, because baby gets heavy, having your feet supported. It's also really important to bring baby close to you. So regardless of whatever breastfeeding position you're in, to aim for what they say is tummy to tummy, so that baby doesn't have to turn their head. So for instance, if we're doing kind of like a cradle position, making sure that baby's tummy is facing you, as opposed to kind of this classic idea of what we think breastfeeding looks like, where baby's tummy is facing up and then they have to kind of crane their neck and their head to get to your breast. So we really want to bring baby in as close as possible and have their tummy towards us so that they're in a comfortable position, and also so they're not kind of pulling the breast backwards with them and causing us any breast pain or nipple damage. Some women like to support their breasts during a feed to ensure that the breast isn't kind of covering baby's nose, and that they're able to breathe during a feed, which is important. And it can also help with getting that good latch. So you can see in those bottom pictures, the mom is using kind of like a C cup hold to support breast and ensure that baby's latching on. And then we latch baby, so we encourage baby to open nice and wide, pulling them close and supporting their back and their neck in the early days. But we don't want to kind of be forcing their head, because it's really hard for them to latch on properly when they're not able to have any kind of movement. And then again, ensuring that baby is coming into the latch, going chin first. And then practice. So practice, practice, practice. If there's any pain, just really remembering to pop baby off of the breast and relatch them and keep trying again until it feels comfortable for you and for baby. And so I've just put a couple of images down here. There's these are kind of the most commonly used breastfeeding positions. So that first one, the cross cradle hold, is really great for the newborn stage, because caregiver has control of baby's head and neck. So when they're tiny and floppy and you need to kind of support them in that way, then you're able to, and then you're also able to kind of control your breast to be able to support that good latch. The second position there is the kind of classic cradle hold, which is usually used when baby's a little bit older, because you're not needing to support their neck again. And then the third one there, side lying position, just like Marguerite shared, can be a really amazing position if you're, for those night feeds, so you're not having to kind of get up and, position yourself and get all your pillows and everything set up for kind of more of an upright position. And it kind of keeps you guys both, sleepy and relaxed and things, but also can be nice during the day. And then that last picture there on the right is called football hold. And so football hold is really ideal for if you've had a cesarean birth, because it kind of takes baby's feet away from your incision area, so that they're not kind of kicking or rubbing against you while you're healing. It's also really great to get a really good look at baby's latch and be able to see everything that's going on, because baby's looking right at you. So yeah, those are a couple of options, but would highly recommend having a look on, YouTube or some of the resources that I'll chat about, because there's some really great videos about how to get into some breastfeeding positions that are kind of specifically beneficial for certain challenges or needs. And then so there are tons of breastfeeding resources, and would absolutely recommend connecting with somebody in person. It's always nice to have that relationship and kind of one-on-one support if possible. So, your midwife or your doctor or a doula, a grandma, an auntie, or maybe a pregnancy outreach worker, a community health nurse. And if someone in your community isn't able to provide that kind of specific support, then maybe they're able to connect you with somebody who can. And then if it's also, the middle of the night and you're needing that support, then there's some really great online resources that are available. And last week I talked a little bit about La Leche League, which if you're not able to join in either their in-person or their virtual breastfeeding support groups, they have fantastic resources and videos online. Same with the Kelly Mom website. Again, there's the Doulas for Aboriginal Grants program. So there are doulas that just do postpartum and breastfeeding support that you might be able to access through them. And then, yeah, some other videos and kind of more in-depth information that families can access if you're needing specific support. And then I've put down at the bottom there the phone number for the BC Women's Lactation Consultant line that's available to families throughout the province. And then also just wanted to lastly mention that some midwives are actually able to provide lactation consultant support for those first 6 weeks postpartum, even if you're not a client of theirs. And they're able to bill that under MSP, so there's no cost to families. So typically lactation consultants offer private services, and so there is a fee if they're not through, a public health unit or something. So just really reaching out and connecting with midwives and different supports in your area to see what might be available to you and your family. And that is everything. And yeah, thank you so much for listening to me. I feel like that was so much information, but would love to hear any thoughts or comments or feedback or questions. And I don't know, Marguerite, if you had any last words that you want.
I want to say, I wouldn't name I want to put this to, it's a cautionary measure that I'm taking. I don't want to name plants and foods from our land, because some of our plants and for tea and for different kinds of foods that we eat or give to our baby, I don't want to do that, because it may be good in our territory, but may be poisonous in other territories. So that's why I direct each mother to go to their aunties, their grandma. They know what is good for you and what is not, what foods that can be poisonous, because some of our stuff here are plants and food, and anything we get from the land may be good for us here, but in your land it may not be good. So that's why I wouldn't name any plants or anything. You have to look at the stuff on your land, where you come from, where it's safe for you. And I'm hoping that my words and my teachings and my guidance helped you today. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Marguerite. I just want to, so what I think we'll do is we'll stop recording and come off Facebook. And so if anyone would like to ask any questions, now's a great time to do so, and it won't be recorded. And yeah, I just want, for time's sake, I just want to quickly mention that next week we'll be joined by Jessie Newman, and she's an Indigenous health dietitian, and she's going to be talking about pregnancy and postnatal nutrition. So that's next Wednesday, October 21st, at the same time at 12 o'clock. And so, yes, I just also wanted to extend a really big thank you to both Ashley and Marguerite for sharing your knowledge with us today. And with that, I'll stop talking and we'll stop recording. And if anyone has anything to say or share, please feel free to do so.